Welcome to this explainer. Picture this. It's the morning of August 3rd, 2016. 300 people are strapped into a Boeing 777 for what is supposed to be a completely routine flight from India to Dubai. Sitting right there in the cabin is a 62-year-old man with a folded duty-free lottery ticket in his pocket. It's a ticket that, in just 6 days, is going to win him a cool $1 million. But honestly, whether he's actually going to be alive to collect it, that's the real question. Because this incredibly advanced, highly experienced aircraft is about to take its final, fateful journey.
Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly does a perfectly functioning, state-of-the-art aircraft just fall out of the sky onto a runway it has literally landed on thousands of times before? Well, as we look through the data, it turns out it's not just one thing. It's this really complex, almost unbelievable web of weather anomalies, technical automation, and human psychology that ultimately brought Emirates Flight 521 down.
Part 1. The setup, the crew, and the plane.
So, our aircraft is a Boeing 777-300, which is an absolute workhorse with 58,000 flight hours. But the real focus here has to be on the two men in the cockpit, because they were about to face a scenario they had never trained for. On the left, we've got a 34-year-old Emirati captain. He is a brilliant pilot, making captain a full decade earlier than most. But his training records contain some pretty crucial foreshadowing. Evaluators had actually flagged his tendency to flare, pull the nose up, too early during landings. And even more importantly, during simulator training, they noticed that under intense pressure, he suffered from severe tunnel vision, locking onto a single task and ignoring everything else around him. Plus, despite flying for Emirates, he rarely landed at his home airport of Dubai, especially compared to his 37-year-old Australian first officer.
Part 2. The Invisible Trap.
As they approach Dubai, this incredibly deadly, totally invisible trap is being set. It's an intensely hot summer day. We're talking 48 degrees Celsius outside, with the runway concrete baking at a blistering 67 degrees. Now, this extreme heat interacts with a stalled sea breeze to create a very localized, very dangerous phenomenon known as wind shear. Right over the runway, there is a sudden, drastic change in wind direction. Inside this boundary, the wind is blowing as a tailwind, but literally just a few hundred meters away, it violently shifts into a headwind.
To really grasp why this is so dangerous, you have to understand a fundamental rule of aviation. Think of it like this. Imagine a plane parked on a runway with its engines totally off, facing a 10-knot headwind. Its ground speed is 0, obviously, but because the air is moving over the wings, its airspeed is 10 knots. See, an airplane's wings do not care how fast the plane is moving across the ground. They only care how fast the air is flowing over them. More headwind equals more lift. So a sudden loss of that wind, like you get flying through wind shear, means a sudden, terrifying loss of lift.
Now, what's really interesting here is how this perfectly illustrates a classic Swiss cheese model of compounding failures that left the crew entirely blind to this danger. The 777 actually has a predictive wind shear radar, but it works by bouncing signals off moisture in the air. Out in the bone-dry Dubai desert, the radar had absolutely nothing to see. It was completely blind. On top of that, the pilots were suffering from warning fatigue. Dubai issues wind shear cautions so often in the summer that pilots basically treat them as standard background noise. And the real kicker? 2 planes right ahead of them had just aborted their landings due to the winds, but air traffic control never relayed this critical information to our crew.
Part 3. A flawed landing sequence. Flight 521 descends toward the runway in total ignorance of the trap waiting for them. They are flying right into extreme heat thermals, literally columns of hot air rising off that scorching concrete, while the shifting winds just manipulate the aircraft's lift, and those final 26 seconds, absolute chaos. At 40 feet, which is about 10 feet higher than normal, the captain initiates his early flare. At 25 feet, the autothrottle assumes the plane is about to touch down and automatically pulls the engine power all the way to idle. So, between the early flare, those rising hot thermals, and the cushion of air trapped under the wings known as ground effect, the plane just refuses to land. It floats. It's essentially a zombie plane caught between flying and landing. Finally, an astonishing 1,090 meters past the runway threshold, the right landing gear kisses the concrete.
Part 4. The System Clash. Man versus Machine.
This brings us right to the absolute climax of our explainer. This is the exact moment human instinct violently collides with automated aircraft logic. The split second that right landing gear touched the runway, the Boeing 777's computers transitioned the aircraft from air mode to ground mode. Ground mode logic is a deliberate, automated safety feature designed to prevent a plane from accidentally accelerating after it has already landed. To do this, the system silently, electronically disarms the TOGA or take-off go-around switches located right on the thrust levers.
Now the captain, realizing they have floated way too far down the runway, makes the call to abort the landing and go around. Relying entirely on deep-seated muscle memory, he executes the standard procedure. Step 1, he presses the TOGA switches. Step 2, he calls to retract the flaps to 20. Step 3, he pulls back on the controls to climb. He fully expects those massive engines to just roar to life automatically. He is completely, totally unaware that Step 1 has just been electronically blocked.
0. That is the exact amount of thrust being generated by those massive engines right now. Remember that training note about the captain's tunnel vision we talked about earlier? Well, it's back. He is so hyper-focused on pitching the aircraft up carefully just to avoid scraping the tail on the concrete that he never looks down. He literally doesn't realize his own hand is resting on thrust levers that haven't moved a single inch from idle.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how a cockpit can just break down under intense stress. The captain is entirely focused outside on the pitch, totally missing the physical cue of the idle thrust levers right under his own hand. Meanwhile, the first officer is focused inside, turning the altitude dial and talking on the radio, completely missing the rapidly plummeting airspeed indicator. The aircraft is coasting upwards entirely on borrowed energy. I mean, nobody is actually flying the plane.
Part 5. The aftermath, fire, and survival.
So the energy finally runs out. Just 18 seconds after the captain called for the go-around, the 777 loses its battle with gravity. It slams hard into the concrete, totally tears off its right engine, and slides on its belly for 800 meters in a massive fireball. Inside that smoke-filled cabin, survival becomes this chaotic scramble. An aircraft evacuation is supposed to take 90 seconds, right? This one takes 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Several of the exterior escape slides blow completely flat in the wind or just fail entirely. Inside, the delay is made so much worse by panicked passengers actually stopping to grab luggage from the overhead bins. In all the confusion, one mother even runs backwards, fighting against the flow of escaping passengers, just to find her 7-year-old daughter. But miraculously, despite the utter chaos and the flames, all 300 passengers and crew make it out of that aircraft alive.
However, the event was absolutely not without profound tragedy. 9 minutes and 40 seconds after the crash, the aircraft's center fuel tank exploded. A massive panel of the wing was blasted high into the air, striking and killing firefighter Jassim al-Baluchi. He had been bravely standing right at his post, fighting the flames from the very moment the plane stopped sliding. Tragically, he was the only person that day who didn't get to go home.
Following the crash, a rigorous 4-year investigation led to some really sweeping changes across the entire aviation industry. Air traffic control in Dubai is now strictly mandated to pass go-around and wind shear information down to all following aircraft. Boeing updated its manuals to explicitly demand that pilots physically verify thrust lever movement during a go-around. And Emirates, they added this exact, terrifying ground mode scenario directly into their recurring simulator training. Oh, and as for passenger Mohammed Kadar, he walked away from those flames, and just 6 days later, he claimed his $1 million lottery prize.
It all leaves us with a pretty chilling realization about modern technology. We build these incredibly smart airplanes to protect us from ourselves. But, as we saw so clearly with Flight 521, when deeply ingrained human muscle memory clashes with silent, automated safety logic in a split-second crisis, the results can be catastrophic. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. As our machines get smarter and smarter, where does the ultimate control truly lie? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.